an assignment. Attending all the 4 sessions and submitting the said assignment are the necessary preconditions for the issuance of the certificate of completion. We hope that you have acquainted yourself with the code of ethics, which was emailed to you and is required to be adhered to during the course of this event. Please join us in welcoming our facilitator for the masterclass on emergency arbitration, Mr. Ratan K. Singh. A renowned name in the field of arbitration and the head of the chambers of Ratan K. Singh, Mr. Ratan's areas of practice include arbitration, both domestic and international, construction, infrastructure, engineering and technology law, real estate, commercial law, mining law, to name a few. He did his master's in geology and bachelor's in law from the Delhi University back in 1996. He is a fellow of Chartered Institute of Arbitrators UK and has done his diploma in international commercial arbitration from CIR UK. Mr. Ratan dons many hats and regularly appears as both counsel and arbitrator in domestic as well as international arbitrations. Mr. Ratan's association with the Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law goes back years. He has sponsored various academic competitions, including the Ratan K. Singh Essay Competition on International Arbitration 2019, also organized by the CADR. Mr. Ratan has also sponsored the gold medal for the topper in the ADR subject. This masterclass is the brainchild of our faculty coordinator, Dr. Gurmanpreet Kaur, and my colleague, Ms. R.V. Singh. With the meteoric rise in construction and infrastructure-related disputes in the wake of the pandemic, coupled with the need for time-sensitive relief, the scope of emergency arbitration needs to be revisited and possibly remolded to best suit the needs of the present day. Sir, we're immensely grateful to you for agreeing to be a part of this event. The participants of this masterclass come from all parts of the world and are a fair mix of students, scholars, and practitioners, thereby holding the promise of an event rich in insights and interaction. With your support, we hope to make this event a great learning experience for everyone involved. With these words, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ratan to share his valuable insights with us.
Thank you. Thank you, all the organizers. Thank you, RGNLU Arbitration Center, Lex ADR, Bar and Bench, and thanks all the participants for being with us today in this class on master class on emergency arbitration. Before I start my talk, and let me give you an idea about how I propose to go in these 2 days. Today, we will talk about emergency arbitration as a concept, how it evolved, how it has been in practice, what are enforceability issues, if there are any, how it is going, how popular this is, and all these general understanding about emergency arbitration as a concept. Tomorrow, we will discuss a case study. We'll have a case study. That case is an emergency arbitration, which I conducted in the month of March 2020, and it continued during this lockdown period. It was under JCAA rules, Japan Commercial Arbitration Association rules. So I'll take you through the journey of this particular emergency arbitration, which I have conducted recently, very recently rather. And I'll also talk about, in tomorrow's talk, some of the litigations which have arisen out of this emergency arbitration, in order to give you the Indian context to this whole concept of emergency arbitration. So that is what would be tomorrow's talk and leftover of today's talk. This is one. I have one suggestion again. For tomorrow's talk, I request all of you to go through Articles 71 to 279 of JCAA rules, Japan Commercial Arbitration Association rules, because I would be referring to some of the provisions of this particular JCAA rules in order to give you better insight about the controversy and the litigation which has arisen out of this emergency arbitration. Now, to start today's talk on emergency arbitration, let me start with a situation. What happens if a client comes to a lawyer, goes to a lawyer and requests to initiate a litigation, initiate a list, initiate an action in a court of law? Lawyer obviously files a suit. I'm giving you a typical Indian court scenario. What happens is, lawyer goes and files a suit, initiates a process called suit. And invariably what happens is, client would say that this particular suit is going to take time till the time I get the final judgment or decree. But I need certain immediate interim relief against the other side called defendant. Let us assume that it was a case where an agreement to sell was entered into with somebody. That somebody is refusing to sell the property to this person, plaintiff. Plaintiff goes to court and he fears that till the time he succeeds in getting a decree from the court, the defendant may sell off that property to somebody else. So by the time he gets a degree, that particular degree will have lots of difficulties at the time of execution, because somebody else will come in to say that I have purchased this property, and so on and so forth. And that somebody else may have sold this property to yet another person. So it will really complicate the life of the whole process. And so therefore, what happens is, this person tells the lawyer, I need interim protection, interim, some measure of relief or some conservatory order. So what happens is, lawyer goes to court and he files an application requesting the court to restrain the defendant from selling this property to anybody else. So court granted an interim injunction against that defendant who had agreed to sell the property. And court now says, till the time this court is deciding this particular list, you are not going to sell this property. You are restrained from selling this property to anybody else. So that order, which is an interim order, will be passed by the court. Now, what happens if you have an arbitration agreement between the parties? Let us assume that in that agreement to sell, on the basis of which plaintiff wanted to purchase the property, contains an arbitration clause. What happens then? There are two options with this plaintiff or this claimant. One of the options would be that he'll get the arbitration tribunal constituted. So arbitration tribunal is formed. Then he files an application before the arbitral tribunal and requests for an interim injunction against the defendant. And that is doable. Arbitrator has got all the powers under Section 17 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act in India to pass any such order in order to protect the subject matter, in order to protect the claimant. Now, there can be another situation, third situation, and that third situation could be that this person, the claimant, says that by the time arbitral tribunal will be constituted, this person may sell the property. So I do not have really time to wait till arbitral tribunal is constituted, because the constitution of tribunal takes time. Even if parties would have agreed for a named arbitrator, even then it takes some time. Arbitrator will take some time in organizing its affairs. If parties had not agreed for a named arbitrator, then other side who is wanting to delay the process and frustrate the process, he would be reluctant in agreeing with you in appointment of an arbitrator. You may have to go to court, court will appoint an arbitrator. This process is again going to take time. So you have another remedy, and that remedy is provided under Section 9 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act, under which a party can straight away go to court even before constitution of the arbitration tribunal and before formation of the arbitration tribunal, and request the court to grant appropriate remedy, conservative order in favor of the claimant and the petitioner who goes to court. Now, till this stage, you all would know, and it has nothing to do with emergency arbitration. This is a typical scenario. You as a lawyer, you as a law student, professional would know. This is how you have been availing the remedies. Now, one may argue that I had agreed for arbitration, and there were reasons. There are reasons why I wanted to have my dispute resolved through arbitration, because of the inherent advantages of arbitration. Why you opted for arbitration? You opted for arbitration for various reasons. And some of the reasons are, one, it can be confidentiality. You wanted the whole process to be confidential for business reasons, for many other reasons. You never wanted your dirty lanes to be vast in open. Confidentiality is one of the fundamental reasons why parties opt for arbitration. Secondly, very important reason could be the expertise of arbitrator. You opted for arbitration because, and let us talk about, when we are talking about institutional arbitration, in these 2 days of this class, we will be talking about institutional arbitration. We will not be talking about ad hoc arbitration, though I have a assignment for all of you, which I'll be talking about at the end of today's session. Now, so what happened was we opted for arbitration for a reason. Reason was that in the event of dispute, I'll approach the concerned arbitration institution, which has got very impressive panel of arbitrators. I have faith in the ability of that institution to appoint an appropriate and expert arbitrator who will be an appropriate person to decide my disputes. Now, this is another region. Apart from confidentiality, this is another region. I wanted arbitration. I wanted all the disputes to be resolved through the process of arbitration. I gave you two regions. There can be another region. Another region could be that I wanted arbitration, therefore, I want every issue and every aspect to be resolved through the process of arbitration. Now, how to achieve this was a problem. And this problem was resolved because if you talk about institutional arbitration, again, institutional arbitration traditionally was, till a decade ago, used to give you a framework in which party who was aggrieved was supposed to approach the institution. Institution will appoint and constitute a tribunal, and then tribunal will initiate the process, and the process goes on, and then finally you get an award. But there was no remedy under institutional rules for urgent situations, emergency situations, a situation where you need relief in a day or two, in a couple of days, a week, 10 days, 15 days. Under typical traditional institutional rules, there was no mechanism under which you could have got urgent, emergent relief within a week or two. And this was a gap which was felt by many arbitration institutions. This whole concept of emergency arbitration, in fact, one may have issue, and there are many scholars who have issue with this very phrase of emergency arbitration, because there is a school of thought that says it is not an arbitration at all. But that is something we'll discuss in some detail in a while. But this concept, quote unquote, emergency arbitration, as we popularly know it, as it is known popularly, it started almost a decade ago. It is therefore, it is not very old phenomenon. It started with ICDR, the International Arbitration Wing of American Arbitration Institution, American Arbitration Association, AAA. And it became popular. In fact, in 2010, we saw Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, SCC, coming out with provisions for emergency arbitration. Very same year, SIEC, which has been very quick in adopting innovations, SIEC, Singapore International Arbitration Center, adopted this. ICC, again, ICC came out with provisions for emergency arbitration in 2012. I remember. In fact, their Secretary General, Mr. Jason Fry, he was in India to promote this 2012 ICC arbitration rules. And I was asked to speak with him in an event here. And I still remember that event. After ICC, LCIA came out with emergency arbitration rules. Then you had HKIAC, and so on and so forth. So now almost all popular institutions are having provisions for emergency arbitration. And they get some amount of emergency arbitration caseload, they get that. Is it, how does it work? And whether, see, general notion is that if you go for emergency arbitration situation, if you will go for this kind of situation, you generally will not get the reliefs. And that has not been the case. In fact, if you see the statistics, there are some statistics which are publicly available. Around 30%, I would say, I'm giving a broad figure, around 30%, in around 30% cases, people get interim measure of protection from emergency arbitrators. In fact, HKIC, though their caseload was very less, HKIC, under HKIC rules, more people got emergency measures and protection then their reliefs were denied. So it has worked very well with the claimants who have been approaching the institutions for emergency arbitration. Now, question is, what is this emergency arbitration? Is it really an arbitration? Is it a process which assists the arbitration? Is it really part of arbitration? Is it really separate from arbitration? What is this? How does it really work? In fact, emergency arbitration offers temporary solution before constitution of the main or regular arbitration tribunal. And now let us remind ourselves, when I said that if you had an arbitration agreement, you wanted some interim measure of protection before formation of the tribunal, what is that you did? If you did not have provision for emergency arbitration, you had approached the court under Section 9 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act, and court granted you relief under the provisions of Section 9 of the Act. Now here, under emergency arbitration, it is almost an analogous situation where you need an urgent relief, you approach the relevant institution which you agreed for, which has got provision for emergency arbitration. That institution will, on your mere request, in a day or two will appoint an arbitrator. Considering the nature of the dispute, which you will be writing in your notice for emergency arbitration, the institution will appoint a suitable, an experienced and a skillful arbitrator. I have used these three expressions: experienced, suitable, and skillful arbitrators for the region, because generally it is understood that emergency arbitrators should be really experienced arbitrators, should be skillful arbitrators, because this process is very intense. And for the region, I'm going to tell you in a while. And region, in fact, let me tell you straight away, region is that this arbitrator, who is going to be sole arbitrator, is going to be appointed in a day or two by the institution, and he has to, or she has to, decide this emergency arbitration within a limited, very tight time frame, and that is, in some cases it is 5 days, in some cases like ICC has 2 weeks, SIEC has 15 days, and JCAA, which would be going to be the reference for tomorrow's talk, has 15 days. In fact, SCC requires the emergency arbitrator to decides within 5 days. So very tight timeline. And this emergency arbitrator has to also follow the bare minimum or the basic of requirements of due process, principles of natural justice. So it is really a very intense process. Now, going back to the basics, as I said, you wanted immediate relief. For that, you didn't want to go to court. You have approached the the arbitration institution. The moment your request reached the institution appointed an emergency arbitrator with a mandate that he would be deciding that dispute, that particular your request for interim measure of protection or your request for conservatory orders within a limited timeline, and that is 5 days, 10 days, or 15 days, whatever is the requirement of the emergency, the institutional rule. And there are provisions. Generally, this is the provision in all these institutional rules that the institution retains this power to extend the time on the request of this emergency arbitrator if situation really warrants. However, generally, the emergency arbitrators would be reluctant in seeking any extension of time. In my experience, I have not seen emergency arbitrators seeking extension of time, because it is also about the credibility of the concerned emergency arbitrator. Now, what he does is, the emergency arbitrator, who should have enough time, it is not only about expertise, but it is also about availability. So therefore, many a times, lots of people are not willing to accept such an appointment, because within 15 days, you will be involved virtually day and night in getting you will be in touch as an arbitrator, you will be in touch with the parties, there will be exchange of pleadings, there will be exchange of maybe many other things, which I'll discuss in some detail tomorrow. So it is something you are supposed to have enough time to devote for this particular proceeding, apart from your skill and expertise. Now, one important aspect is it really arbitration? Now, if you try to define arbitration, one of the important facets and attributes of arbitration, quote unquote arbitration, as a dispute resolution mechanism, is that arbitrator decides the disputes finally, and decision of the arbitrator is final and binding. Take a typical case of any arbitration, and I'm audible to all. There is some issue with internet.
Yes, sir. You are.
Are we? Am I audible?
No, sir. Some sort of fluctuations are coming up. I guess there is some.
But otherwise, it is okay.
It was okay for a while. For the last 5 minutes, there is some network issue.
Okay, now I think it is okay.
Yes, sir. Now it's fine.
Okay, great. Arbitration as a concept. Oh, somebody has asked, can the same arbitrator be appointed in the main tribunal? Answer is no, until unless parties have agreed otherwise. Now, going back to the fundamental issue, what is arbitration? Arbitration, one of the attributes of arbitration is that a private judge, who is the arbitrator, decides the disputes finally, and his decision is final and binding as well as enforceable. Now, let us keep this in mind. That is the definition. That means the arbitrator decides the disputes finally. Now, contrast this with the role of emergency arbitrator and status of the decision of emergency arbitrator. What emergency arbitration does, the arbitrator does is, he does not decide the disputes and issues finally. He only decides the issues brought before him for the purposes of granting or otherwise interim measure of protection, interim. So he passes an order which is interim in nature, which is not final in nature, it is temporary in nature, it is not final in nature. In other words, he does not decide the disputes finally. Whereas one of the fundamentals and fundamental attribute of arbitration is that arbitrator must decide the disputes finally. This is how we have known arbitration as a concept. This is how we traditionally define arbitration as a concept. But when it comes to decision of emergency arbitrator, it is not final. So this is where one can argue that the decision of emergency, the decision of emergency arbitration cannot be said to be an outcome of an arbitration, or emergency arbitrator cannot be said to be an arbitrator in that strict traditional sense of arbitration. Another important aspect, and which is very important, is whenever an arbitrator renders an award, what happens is that award, if not obeyed and followed by and complied by the award debtor, that award will be enforced by the court of law. If it is a domestic award, it will be executed as a decree of the court. In India, it is part 1. If it is a foreign award, it will be enforced in any country, another country, all countries which are convention countries, which are signatories to New York Convention, because it is an award. Now, this is where I would like all of you to remind yourself of New York Convention. New York Convention made this arbitration as a mechanism this popular all across the globe. Today, around 164 countries, last one is Tonga, 164 countries are signatories to this convention, New York Convention of 1956. And now New York Convention, why it became popular and why it has made arbitration popular is for the simple reason that if award is rendered or passed in any of the countries, 164 countries, it can be enforced in all these 164 countries. That is the beauty of international commercial arbitration and New York Convention. Now, however, when you see New York Convention and when you see
Hello.
New York does not orders, yes.
Sir, there is some network issue. Yes, sir. There is some network issue. I would really request you if you could speak again whatever you have spoken for the last 5 minutes, because we can't hear you. Hello. I guess there's some network issue on your side, sir. Hello. 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 Yeah. So kindly unmute yourself.
Is it
Yes,
better
sir.
now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now it's
You hear me?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Now we were talking about New York Convention. New York Convention seeks to enforce award, which are final in nature. Award by its definition, it's something which determines the disputes finally. So New York Convention does not enforce any interim order or any decision of any emergency arbitrator. Now, what is the consequence of this? Consequence of this is that if you have any decision rendered by any emergency arbitrator in any foreign jurisdiction, foreign seated arbitration, and you want this order, this emergency to be in any other country, enforceability would be an issue unless you are taking this decision to some of the countries where local legislations are recognizing these emergency arbitrators. Let me straight this whole concept. Now, Singapore is one country which has got local legislation which recognizes emergency arbitration as arbitration. So in their International Arbitration Act, as well as in the Local Arbitration Act, they have amended the definition of arbitration to include emergency arbitration. And result is that any emergency arbitration in Singapore is recognized as arbitration and it is enforceable in Singapore. Obviously, any emergency arbitration decision rendered in Singapore cannot be enforced in India or in any other convention country, New York Convention country, because New York Convention per se does not recognize that. In fact, after Singapore, we had Hong Kong. Hong Kong amended its ordinance, and again, they included emergency arbitration in the definition of arbitration. Now, you have some countries which are recognizing emergency arbitration, like Singapore, I said, Hong Kong, South Korea, New Zealand, Bolivia. These are some of the countries. There are very few countries, I must tell you, which are recognizing and enforcing emergency arbitration, recognizing emergency arbitration and enforcing emergency arbitration decision. That is the issue. Now, enforceability is an issue because there is no multilateral instrument which can really help enforcement of such decisions. That is important. Now, it is a coincidence, and I'll go in further detail in tomorrow's talk. Yesterday, I argued in Delhi High Court with regard to one emergency arbitration decision rendered in Japan, Tokyo. I said that this emergency arbitration, quote unquote, is unknown to Indian law. The decision given by this emergency arbitrator is not enforceable and it has got no legal effect in India. This is what I argued yesterday. And we will discuss whatever the context and how we argued this. Now, how do you really deal with this? Actually, what has happened is this emergency arbitration as a concept has become popular because of the reasons I told you earlier. Now, invariably, people are going for emergency arbitration for the inherent benefits attached to it. However, there is either reluctance or unawareness amongst the legislatures in coming out with legislative framework for enforcement or recognition of emergency arbitration and enforcement of emergency arbitrators' decision. There are some countries, and particularly European countries like Austria, if I may give example of, they think it is appropriate, easier, less time consuming for the parties to go to court and get the appropriate relief rather than going for emergency arbitrator. So they have policy regions to not recognize emergency arbitration. And there are jurisdictions where it is just being ignored. But now emergency arbitration is here to stay. It is being invoked regularly. Parties are getting reliefs. And now, in fact, there are some jurisdictions like I'm reminded of one decision of Ukrainian court. There, one Ukrainian court enforced a foreign seated emergency arbitrator's decision, and without, in fact, they said that we will be enforcing this, and this is one of, though I would say that it is one of the exceptions, it's not a rule. Now, question today is, in India, we have MCIA. Let us take an example of one arbitration institution, MCIA. Now, MCIA has got provision for emergency arbitration. And in fact, it has followed, it is similar to ICC rules. They say that emergency arbitrator will decide the dispute brought before him within 14 days. Now, what happens if you have an emergency arbitrator's decision under MCIA rules? Let us think over. In India, we do not have any legislative regime, legislative provision. Our Arbitration and Conciliation Act does not recognize arbitration. In fact, there are judgments, including judgment of Raffles of Delhi High Court, Raffles judgment of Delhi High Court, which says that emergency arbitration is not recognized in India. Now, let us talk about MCIA emergency arbitration provisions. What happens if two Indian parties opts for MCIA rules? One party goes to MCIA for invocation of the provisions for emergency arbitration. Emergency arbitrator renders his decision, and the party against whom that decision has been rendered is refusing to comply with the decision, though it is written in in every institutional rule, wherever they have provisions for emergency arbitration, that the party against whom any decision will be given by the emergency arbitrator, the party will be bound to follow the decision in a timely manner, without delay. Yes, it is all written. But what happens if, let us take an example of MCIA. MCIA appointed emergency arbitrator renders a decision, which decision is not being followed by the party against whom that decision is rendered. Is there any legislative, legal recourse to the party in whose favor that decision has been given? Now, if it would have been an order passed by the main arbitration tribunal, and if it would have been the order under section 17 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, that order would have been enforceable like an order of the court through the process of the court. But here what is going to happen is, since Arbitration and Conciliation Act does not recognize emergency arbitration, therefore the party in whose favor this decision has been given is only having contractual remedy, and that remedy would be to file a suit based on that decision, or file a section 9 petition in court. That is another route people are taking in India or in some other jurisdiction. You are going to court, you have got an emergency decision, you want its enforcement in India. What is happening? There are, like Raffles judgment. In Raffles, what had happened was, one arbitrator, it was SIEC arbitration. Parties had agreed for arbitration under the rules of SIEC. One of the parties invoked emergency arbitration provision. SIEC appointed an emergency arbitrator. That emergency arbitrator,
Please.
Somebody has done something somewhere. He has to unmute himself.
Yes, I muted him.
Yeah, okay. Now, in Raffles, that is a good example. In Raffles decision, I'll give you citation tomorrow. In Raffles decision, it was Justice Bibu Bhagru's judgment of Delhi High Court. The emergency arbitrator gave its decision. Now, that decision was brought by the party in whose favor that decision was given to India, because they wanted enforcement of that decision in India. What was the option with him? Since in India, that decision of emergency arbitrator given in a Singapore seated arbitration could not be enforced straight away through New York Convention, and there is no other legislative framework or provision in India for enforcement of any order or interim order passed in different jurisdiction. Now, only option with that particular party was to file an independent proceeding here in India under section 9 by referring to section 2, subsection 2 of section 2 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act in India. So the party who succeeded in Singapore in obtaining an emergency arbitration decision wanted enforcement of that decision in India, had to rely upon subsection 2 of section 2 and then file section 9 proceeding petition in Delhi High Court. Now, only thing what was said was, and in fact the finding of the court was, that this Indian court is not bound by the decision of the emergency arbitrator, one, because there is no legal instrument. It is not in there is no legal instrument for enforcement of such a interim order. Therefore, court said that this Indian court will apply its mind independently. Yes, Indian court said, Delhi High Court said, we may give some deference to the decision, but court has to apply its mind independently. Therefore, ultimately what happened was that party which succeeded in getting that order had to initiate yet another proceeding in Indian court, and the other party which has played in before the emergency arbitrator got yet another opportunity to argue its case once again before Delhi High Court. Now, this is the problem with enforceability, and one reason why it is not becoming, emergency arbitration is not becoming as popular as it could be, is because of the enforceability issue. Now, one may try to understand what are the ways to deal with this enforceability. How can we really deal with this enforceability problem? There are two options which I see straight away. One is that New York Convention itself recognizes in the interim orders or orders to be enforceable. That is one route. In other words, New York one option is emergency. The New York Convention recognizes emergency arbitration and also makes provision for enforceability of orders and interim orders, which is not the case now. Orders cannot be enforced. Orders passed by any even duly constituted regular tribunal are not enforceable under New York Convention. What is enforceable is only final award. So this is one route, and that route is that we deal with New York Convention in a manner that it recognizes emergency arbitration and makes provision for enforceability of orders and another option is the route of adoption of provision which has been suggested by model law. Let me take a step back. When we talk about, I hope I am audible now. Are we? Am I audible?
Sir,
yes.
There is some disturbance, but you are audible right now.
Okay. Anybody and everybody who reads arbitration, he knows and he should know three things. Ancestral model law, which is the basis for your Arbitration and Conciliation Act in India, which is the basis for arbitration legislations in almost all trading nations. So this model law, ancestral model law, which was a model law created by United Nations, which has been adopted all across the globe, does not have, this ancestral model does not recognize emergency arbitration. As I said, the New York Convention, which made arbitration so popular all across the globe and enforceable all across the globe, does not recognize emergency arbitration. The UNCITRAL rules, which is the model for ad hoc arbitration, does not talk about emergency arbitration. However, there is one way forward. UNCITRAL model law came out with an amendment in its article, whereby it has suggested that let domestic legislations have a provision for enforcement of orders passed in a foreign seated arbitration. Let me repeat myself. Model law was amended, if I'm not mistaken, in 2006, which incorporated a provision that any order passed in a foreign seated arbitration will be enforced. So, if today India or other countries adopts this particular provision and brings this in the Arbitration and Conciliation Act in India and in their respective arbitration legislation, what is the effect? Effect could be that orders passed in other jurisdictions can be enforced in India, and tomorrow the state courts may interpret that the order will include interim order. That was the case that Indian case which I was referring. So these are the two way forwards I see, which can arbitration. This is it's becoming. I saw a question, somebody asked a question. Question says, if it cannot be enforced in India, or if it cannot be enforced in other jurisdictions, then how do we, why should we go for such a, and this has some merit. But in fact, there are jurisdictions where situation is very weird, if I may say so. Japan. I talked about Singapore, I talked about Hong Kong, I talked about Korea, New Zealand. There, the legislations recognize emergency arbitration and emergency arbitrators' decision and made provisions for enforcement. Whereas in Japan, JCAA, which is Japan Commercial Arbitration Association, which is arbitration center, has got provision for emergency arbitration, but legislation, domestic legislation, does not have any provision at all in relation to emergency arbitration. In other words, you have no provision for challenge, you have no provision for enforceability even. And when I say this, it is weird, it is not only weird in the Japanese context, same is the case with India, same is the case in other jurisdictions. So there has to be a synergy. If institutions are having provisions for emergency arbitrations in their rules, then that is workable and that is beneficial to the parties only if, I should not say only, but it would be appropriate if there are proper legislations in that jurisdiction. There are cases, and I would say some good number of cases where parties voluntarily agree with the decision of emergency arbitrators, even if it is not enforceable like an award. But in order to show the regular main arbitration tribunal that my conduct was fair, I'm a good boy, parties would comply with the emergency arbitration. That is the case, but this is not the case everywhere, and this is not the case always. Therefore, we need intervention at international level, as I said, multilateral, or we can have bilateral treaties, you can have multilateral treaties, you can have regional treaties, or you can have legislative changes in order to recognize emergency arbitration and enforce emergency arbitrators' decision. In fact, I saw one question, somebody's question. In fact, question answer session today, and it's already 6:33. Should we start taking question answer?
Sir, we have just 2-3 questions, of which you have answered one, but there is one question which needs to be answered because it's from a student who wants to know the difference between summary arbitration and emergency arbitration. Because the basic is unclear, so the whole...
there is nothing called summary arbitration. You have something called expedited arbitration. In fact, today I'll give a task to every participant. Go back and try to understand for yourself, is there any possibility of emergency arbitration in ad hoc arbitration, or an arbitration which is not assisted by any arbitration institution? Let me repeat myself. Try to understand for yourself, is there any way parties can have emergency arbitration in an ad hoc arbitration regime, and that too in 2 situations. This question is for 2 situations. One, when you have a legislative regime which recognizes emergency arbitration and enforcement of the decision, and another where it is not being recognized. In fact, I'll tell you, even ICC, this question on summary, even ICC prior to this emergency arbitration concept, there was a pre-arbitration referee procedure which ICC used to have. There were many other ways how people try to hit a gap, but nothing was as closure as emergency arbitration to the very concept of arbitration. Now, expedited, you have expedited arbitrations. You have provision in Indian Arbitration and Conciliation Act in a time-bound manner. You will have an arbitration whole arbitration process concluded. But difficulty with situation today is that emergency arbitration is different. Emergency arbitration is not expedited arbitration. Emergency arbitration has to be conducted in such a time frame like 15 days or 14 days or 5 days. And if you see the provisions and procedures for expedited arbitrations, there are many, many differences. So that is very different. Yes, other question, Arbi?
Yes, sir. There is one question by Zenia Mehta. The question is, does the relief provided by means of provisions of interim relief under Section 9 of the Act overlap with the relief required under the emergency arbitration?
Can you repeat yourself?
Yes, sir. Does the relief provided by means of the provision of interim relief under Section 9 of the Arbitration Act overlaps with the relief required under the emergency arbitration?
It obviously, it always overlaps. Obviously, overlap means it can overlap. It depends on the party concerned, how he praises the relief, the way he wants his relief, but by its very nature, the relief which you get under Section 9 here and in emergency arbitration are similar. In emergency arbitration, one of the requirements under the provisions of the institutions is that you should have urgency. In fact, if you do not have urgency, and if your situation is not emergent, even at the threshold stage, the institution itself may not agree to appoint the emergency arbitrator. That is one very interesting aspect. And otherwise, the tests which are applied by the emergency arbitrator in deciding these emergency measures which are being sought by the parties, there are different schools of thought, but broadly, and I would say generally, arbitrators would apply that internationally, that typical international test, that is triple test, which we call triple test in India, that you should have prima facie case, you should have good case to succeed, the balance of convenience and irreparable injury. So these are three tests. It is worded, phrased differently in different jurisdictions, but this is the test which generally tribunals apply. And there have been instances where emergency arbitrator has dismissed the petition on the ground that there was no urgency. So whenever one goes to emergency arbitrators, in fact, there is one very interesting thing one has to keep in mind. There have instances where the jurisdiction of the emergency arbitrator itself has been challenged before the emergency arbitrator. Now, so then comes the question whether emergency arbitrator is competent and having power to apply the rules of competence and competence. That is, can an emergency arbitrator rule on its own jurisdiction? There is some debate, but generally emergency arbitrators are deciding on its own jurisdiction, and thereafter deciding the issue brought before it. Yes.
So the next question is by Mr. Marisport. The question is emergency arbitration, expedite arbitration, and regular arbitration. He is asking, please advise which is suitable and cost effective for parties.
Suitability, as I said, enforceability is the biggest concern when it comes to emergency arbitration. That is one. Therefore, even if you have obtained an emergency arbitration decision in a foreign seated arbitration, and if you want to have it enforced in other jurisdiction, you will have to initiate another process. Now, so therefore, there is duplicacy of proceeding and duplicacy of cost as well. Yes, again, to argue that whether the court, if you take that decision in a foreign jurisdiction, initiate proceeding under local laws, under provisions like Section 9 of Arbitration and Conciliation Act, again, the decisions jurisdiction, how much deference a court will give to decision given by the emergency arbitrator is one issue. Second, deference does not mean that it is deference only. It's not that court is bound to apply that particular decision. So that is it. So then again, you have two set of costs. So that is you have to consider. Obviously, if emergency arbitration is happening in a jurisdiction where you have legislations which are recognizing emergency, then there is no problem. Yes.
Okay, there is another question from Garv. Sir, as you mentioned, countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and South Korea, they recognize provisions for emergency arbitration. But do they have specific guidelines for publication of the emergency arbitration award?
What is happening is there is no rule as such, to my knowledge, in any of the jurisdictions for publication of awards per se, awards of the regular tribunal or of emergency arbitrators. However, the institutions have now gradually started coming out with decisions in redacted forms, where identity of parties are masked, and now gradually it is happening. In fact, ICC comes out with its own awards, which is published in yearbook every year, and there are other institutions which are doing it. Yes, when you have these decisions going to court, like in Singapore. Now in Singapore, whenever you have arbitration matters, arbitration disputes going to court, courts will again mask the identity of the parties. Even if you have reported judgments, obviously because it is court of law, so judgments will get reported, but they are masking the identity of the parties. And this is something which is a very, very important thing, which even we should look at in India, because it takes away the whole confidentiality, the one of the important attributes of arbitration. But somehow it is not happening, at least in India. Yes, Ari.
Another question, how to differentiate between the requirement of interim relief is required through emergency arbitration and interim relief under Section 9. Therefore, how would the council know when to approach for emergency arbitration and when to approach the court under Section 9?
I had covered this earlier, but I'll again try to answer this. It is a technical decision on the part of the lawyers and the parties to decide whether to go to emergency arbitrator or to go to court. One of the reasons why parties go to arbitration is, as I said earlier, is expertise of the arbitrators. Let us take an example, like today it was said that we talk about construction disputes and construction arbitration. Now, construction arbitration is a different breed of animal. It has its own peculiarities. You have technical aspects, various technical aspects involved in it. It is very fact heavy. It is very issue heavy, documents heavy, and obviously technical in nature. So you need experienced construction arbitrators, or you have M&A dispute, or you have oil and gas dispute. Now what happens? You want one of the reasons why people, because general perception, obviously you have got fantastic judges, some of them who have practiced on a particular area of field of law, and after becoming judges they are deciding those kind of cases. There are many other good judges, but general perception probably is, and why people opt for arbitration is that state judges are generally, again I'm qualifying this by saying generally, are generalists. So therefore, parties do not want their high stake, complex technical matters to be decided by generalists. So this would be one of the considerations for the parties and for the lawyers while deciding whether they want to go to emergency arbitrator or you want to go to court. Again, cost. Cost is another important thing. And yet another important thing I'll tell you is the cost, which is in cost, when I said cost in two respects. One, cost in engaging, first of all, cost in engaging the lawyer. If you are engaging lawyers at two places, one in your country, another in the country where arbitration is seated, then it is just doubles the cost. Third is the administrative fees of the institution. Then fourth is arbitrators' fees of the emergency arbitrator, which is substantial. I must say this, which is very substantial. That is one aspect of cost which parties should weigh before going into going for such a measure, emergency arbitration measure. Another important thing which you should keep in mind is, invariably in arbitration, arbitrators follows this concept of cost follows the event. And when they follow the cost follows the event, it really means, what it really means is, if the claimant which had approached the emergency arbitrator has failed in getting the emergency arbitration, the decision, urgent relief, because emergency arbitrator felt that no urgent relief liable to be granted. In that case, emergency arbitrator may and generally ought burden you with the cost which has been incurred by the other side. So that is one thing which is very, very, very important aspect which you should keep in mind. And when we talk about cost would be generally the actual cost. However, when it comes to the Section 9 proceeding or interim measure of protection proceedings initiated in a state court, particularly in India, I'm not talking about other jurisdictions. In some jurisdiction, you have to pay the actual cost. But in India, courts will either agree with you to grant relief in your favor or will court will not burden you with the actual cost in the other side. So that is one important consideration one should keep in mind. Yes.
Another question.
Are we?
Does impartiality and schedules 5 and 7 are applicable on emergency arbitration proceedings?
See, please appreciate whenever we talk about emergency arbitration, generally you should take it that we are talking in a sense of foreign seated emergency arbitration. Whether it is foreign seated emergency arbitration or it is domestic emergency arbitration, the rule of impartiality, principles and theories of independence and impartiality applies with all force, with all rigor. In fact, whenever appointments are made of emergency arbitrators, whenever appointment request goes to a particular person, that person is supposed to disclose his impartiality and independence. And only then he accepts this. In India, you have Schedule 5 and 7, which is nothing, which is in fact, we have borrowed from IBA guidelines on conflict of interest. And IBA guidelines on conflict of interest is in for decades in international arbitration world. India is, in my understanding, India is the only country which has adopted IBA as part of its legislature and made Article 5 and 7, sorry, the Schedule 5 and 7 is basically borrowed from IBA guidelines on conflict of interest. Otherwise, everywhere IBA guidelines, principles of IBA guidelines on conflict of interest is followed. So it is followed with same rigor. Yes, sir.
So there is one last question which has been privately messaged me. Invoking emergency arbitration would be in view of the emergency arbitration or clause. After termination of the mandate of emergency arbitration, the arbitration agreement or clause will have to be invoked again to constitute the arbitral tribunal. Thus, is it permitted to invoke arbitration agreement or clause twice for the same arbitration?
See, I'll tell you how it works. First of all, one has to invoke emergency arbitration. Thereafter, within X number of days, which is prescribed in various institutional rules, you have to also invoke. During currency of the emergency arbitration, you are also supposed to invoke the main arbitration, because emergency arbitration cannot be taken as a stand-alone mechanism. It is, in a sense, it is a prelude to the main arbitration. And emergency arbitrator's decision is, again, I'll go into all those details when I discuss. Today I was talking about general concepts. We will discuss tomorrow. Now, whenever emergency arbitrator is appointed, he renders his decision. That decision is subject to the decision of the main arbitration tribunal. And when mandate of the arbitration, this emergency arbitration tribunal ceases, is given in some detail in every institutional rules. So we will go into all those. When I said we will discuss 71 to 77 of JCAA rules and some of the case theory, the case journey. We will discuss all of this in some. This is all you have to appoint. So sometimes people say that it is intra-appellate. You have intra-appellate provisions whenever we talk about emergency arbitration. Or you say you have two arbitration in one arbitration. Yes.
These were the questions, sir. Now I would request our worthy registrar to conclude the entire session. Registrar, sir.
So we are bang on time.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
My voice is audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ratan, sir. I, on behalf of Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, I propose a vote of thanks to Advocate Ratan Singh, sir, sparing his valuable time for educating the mass on the arbitration and coordination, with the coordination, Dr. Gurmanpreet and all the students, those who have participated. I hope everybody have learned a great lesson on the topic. Of course, I'm sorry for joining late. I could not hear you from the inception because of some my technical reason actually. And the message was conveyed to Dr. Gurmanpreet. Thank you, Arvi.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ratan, sir. Glad to see you and stay healthy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Ayushi? Okay, so I guess there is some network issue. Ayushi, are you there? I will,
Okay. Dr. Kaur.
Arvi, you can conclude it.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. This is the first session. I'm glad that you all have made it. Some participants did leave because of the network issue. We'll try to resolve it as soon as possible. And I thank Ratan sir that he answered each and every question with all patience. So, and thank you, Gurman ma'am, with all the support that you have given. Hoping to see all the participants in the next session, which is scheduled at the same time. So thank you, everyone. Now you may disconnect and end the session from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ratan sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kaur. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Registrar sir.
Thank you.